I've been bidding, 25 years. That's a bit scary. The number one reason that I see people win tenders is because they know their clients. They know exactly what their clients want and they put themselves second. At its core, tendering is all about the client. In a competitive environment, you have to showcase what it is that only you can do for that client, and that this is something where you have to differentiate to win. The first thing that I just wanted to chat about with you was your thoughts on client-centricity in tendering and what that really means to tender in a client-centric way.
I was your client at one point.
You were.
And for training. And the reason I selected you was that we can work well together. And we were setting something up, and it was something where we had to work together and be philosophically aligned as well. So I think the thing people forget is that tenders don't go out into the ether. There is a person at the other end evaluating that tender, or a panel of people. And so it's not an automatic process of tick, yes, you've covered that question, tick, etc. There are nuances and buying behaviors that come into a tender. And that's the most important thing to remember from the very beginning, not some grand idea that you've dreamed up but haven't tested with the client. So it's all about that, either group or individual decision maker, and then what they want.
Exactly right. I always say that tendering is an exercise in empathy. How would you respond to that idea?
Completely, because you have to get in the client's head. Like, it's not just about reading what they put in the tender document or even looking at their LinkedIn. It's understanding their day-to-day, what drives them as people. Are they ambitious? Are they risk averse? What drives their buying behavior? So really you have to walk in the client's shoes, and that's easier for some people than others.
It is. But I think empathy can be process-oriented if it needs to be.
Yes.
Yeah. It's interesting you say sort of it's putting your feet in the shoes of your client, but it's looking at those multiple dimensions of the organisation and each individual within the organisation that's going to control or influence the outcome. And one of the things that I noticed, and I think what differentiated sort of the approach that I started to bring into tendering was I don't just look at the tender itself. I look at everything that surrounds it. I look at its context, and that expands all the way out to its policy-oriented context. I remember I was doing a bid for Royal Flying Doctors Service. They wanted to do a mobile dental facility. We won the mobile dental facility, and they had a big philanthropic support base there that was bringing half of the funding. But it was like, well, what are we aligning to this? Is this just about getting dentistry out into the regions? And they said, no, it's a larger policy dynamic of approaching chronic illness, and particularly approaching chronic illness in Indigenous communities. And dental and oral hygiene is a huge component of that. And I always reflect back to that there was always this policy parameter around things. So when you look at pursuing a bid, how high do you go? How low do you go? Do you go all the way to policy? What do you look at in terms of the organisation first? And then what do you look at in terms of the individuals within it?
Like you say, you need to know all of that. So I look at the whole ecosystem, particularly for a major deal. So we're not talking about a day-to-day bid that they just want a cover letter or something to tell you what they can, so tell them what you can do. You look at the whole ecosystem. So you do look at policy. You look at emerging trends in the market. You look at what new technology is coming to market, if that's relevant. And then you look at all the organisation and then all the people that will influence the decision. And that's where, when you have a tender, often there'll be a project team, there'll be a director level team, there'll be a C-suite exec team. And all of those people will have some say.
Yeah.
But I have had tenders where the tender has been lost because we only had one of those levels covered. So we might have the project team covered.
Yep.
Or we had everyone all the way up to the minister. I think there was one in one state in Australia where the minister actually overturned a win decision.
Wow, because you really didn't know what that person was thinking.
No, and they were extremely risk averse and cost conscious at the time.
Yes.
And it didn't matter what the project team wanted, they overturned that. So you've got to cast a very wide net when it comes to understanding a major deal. And that's why it's really good to get someone with domain knowledge of that market who can advise on all of the different nuances.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say major deal. I think it applies to anything, no matter the size. So, we're working with not-for-profits who just want $10,000 to do something for the community, all the way through to the multi-billion-dollar tenders. And what I've found is in developing client-centric strategy, it doesn't matter how big the bid is. It doesn't matter if it's minor, medium, major, because it's important to that client. It's their baby. It's something they want to achieve.
The reason I say major deal, I think this really came to the fore a lot in the collaborative contracts. So I was in Melbourne when alliancing became really big in Australia and worked on some of the early water alliances there. And I call it like a space race of tendering because it upped the sophistication level and client analysis for bidding. And so I guess I think about that when I think about client centricity, because we were trying to work out what clients had for breakfast at that point. Because of collaborative contracting, you're not just getting them to evaluate, you're saying, can we work alongside you?
Do we want to work with you?
Yeah. Can we create space for you? Can we use your expertise with us?
Yeah.
So it's all of that.
Yeah. And that's re-emerging at the moment in the Australian market.
Yeah.
Again, how do you get to a point where you know your client that well?
The easiest way, which most people are not comfortable with at all, is talking to them.
Oh, my goodness.
Do I have to go talk to a person? And I think it's something the younger generation really struggles with as well. Like, I can't just text them. I can't WhatsApp them.
Yeah.
I remember there was one organization I was working for that we didn't have a presence with a particular client on one of their panels anymore because no one had reached out. And so I just cold called. I said,
no one knew anybody. Yeah.
Well, they didn't know, and they didn't want to reach out. Then we knew who we needed to speak with. And so I just did a cold call and said, can we have a coffee? Helped drive getting back on the panel.
Yeah.
But it's something that particularly technical specialists are not comfortable with. And I had someone in Singapore once say to me, I can't call that person. I don't know their level of I don't have their level of expertise in this subject matter. I said, it doesn't matter. You're there to listen. You're not there to educate.
That's it. So, that's it. You're there to listen. You're not there to educate. You ask for the chance to hear from them. You ask for the chance to listen to them. And the simplest tool that I have ever taught anyone is to use open questions. Don't tell them what you have. Ask them what they want. Ask them what they need. Just say, how can we help? And the open question allows people the space to allow you to listen.
It does, and it will tell you things that aren't ever in a tender document about the hidden things they're looking for, the hidden nuances as well.
Yeah.
The questions I love asking clients alongside subject matter experts are how do you define value? And what does that mean to you? And are you looking for creativity or innovation? And what does that look like?
Absolutely. And there's this assumption that every client wants innovation. Yeah. Oh, the word innovation is in the tender, but you have to define innovation. Yeah. Are they looking for disruptive innovation that blows everything out of the water? Or are they really just looking for some form of incremental change, just a tweak here and there, disruptive innovation, incremental innovation, or actually they don't want anything new. They just want you to manage what they already have better.
Yeah, they might want to reduce cost and they think innovation is a way to do that, but they don't actually want to take risks.
That's it.
Rules out innovation.
Innovation and risk aversion.
Yeah. And value is a really interesting one because I have had a different answer from every single client I've ever asked this question of. And some have said value to me is not suing each other. Or value is you identifying areas where we can save costs because you don't take our word at face value. You interrogate the solution.
Yeah, love it.
So really good question to ask your client.
Value, that's a really interesting one. Value to us is not suing each other. And immediately when I hear that, I think, okay, well, how does that impact my solution for this client? And the other thing I think to myself in the D&C world is people talk about sort of a no surprises or a non-adversarial approach. But then it's if a client is saying, I don't want to ever see us suing each other, what do they really mean by that? And so therefore, what does it mean to get to a point where you have such a good relationship that you're never going to sue each other? And you define that. You can't just say, we're not going to sue you. Trust us.
You need to develop that trust and open communication. And it comes back to the way you're working with the client.
And then it influences everything you write in your tender. Do you find, I don't know, I do when you are listening to clients, it's often the throwaway line that gives you the deepest insight.
Tangents are amazing. I led a team and we started with a template, but I'd often ignore that template. It did have open questions, but if someone came up with a tangent, we'd go there because that tells me more about what they're looking for, what drives their decisions as an individual as well. So I'd love to hear a client's tangent and what really kept them up and were their priorities.
And then explore that.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. That's kind of from the marketing bent of the multifaceted skill set that is tendering is the, what keeps the client up at night? What are their pain points? And you said, people are reluctant to actually make that phone call. It's funny because every time I've had those sorts of conversations, I've actually found that people are really happy to share.
They really are. It helps them. They are the ones, deciding which supplier to work with for a time, or maybe a few years. And if they get to have a chat with you beforehand and say, this is actually what I'm really after, that helps them as well.
And I guess for the new players out there, we should say this is all happening before the iron curtain of probity comes down. So this is all pre-bid. This is what we call in the pursuit phase.
It is the pursuit phase. So it's you've identified an opportunity, you want to go after it. They can talk openly because there is no probity in place from a tender process, and so they can have an open chat.
It's something that often clients say when we're, having this, well, do you actually know the client? Their government, they won't want to talk to me. And it's like, do you know that? Well, even if we get a meeting with them, they won't answer our questions. Do you know that? Have you tried? Yeah. Have you asked? And I think it's really, really important. If you don't ask, the answer's no. So even after that pursuit phase and you're in the middle of the tender, I often hear from people, we can't ask that question. We can't ask that clarification. It might give something away, or they might think we haven't read the documents. It's like, read the documents first. But what do you think of not asking the question that you probably need to ask in clarification questions?
It's really a risk. So I know there are some companies that are reluctant to do this because their competitors will see the question and then they may get an inkling as to what the offer will be. But you're all tendering for the same thing. It can't be that different to what they're doing as well. So, ideal scenario you've asked before probity kicks in.
Yep.
Sometimes you can have an offline conversation where you're not getting into anything that would be detrimental to the bidding process.
Yep.
So you can do that. If you know someone or you know someone that's worked for the client, you might be able to, test some waters there.
Yeah.
But if it's significant to your understanding of the scope and the contract that you're going to create through the tender, it is essential to ask.
Just ask. And what's the worst that can happen? The client says no.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not giving you that information.
Yeah.
But that's not what I found happens.
No, they're usually pretty generous with their knowledge because, again, it helps them to help us, help us to help you.
That's right.
It's what a tendering process is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to touch on, and I think it's probably higher level client-centric strategy, is using your engagement with clients to actually influence the shape the tender takes before it comes out.
Amazing. When you don't actually need a tendering professional as much, you're not over-relying on the tender. That's the perfect scenario. So I remember there was a campaign I worked on for 3 years for a pursuit before it came out, and it involved a lot of client engagement. There were some executive level events, bringing in international experts, I think from Israel, to meet this client. Mm-hmm. And some of it was video link as well. But really, I think that tender was ultimately successful because of that early engagement. And it was a 5-stage, very grueling tender process, interviews, etc. It was an Australian first technology for this tender as well. But yeah, we did influence what went into that tender because we presented some world-leading solutions. So that found its way into the scope.
And some would argue, you're giving it away and you're allowing others to pursue. It's like, well, not if they don't have the technology that we're actually offering. And I think that is really high level. Getting to a point where you know your client so well that you actually help influence and shape the bid document. One of the things sort of in terms of client centricity, I always say it's actually the hardest place to win from is when you're incumbent. And that's because the client knows you so well. And you know the risks associated with that contract so well. I find clients sometimes actually sink themselves because they wallow in that risk. So there's knowing the client, and then sometimes there's knowing the client so well you actually do yourself detriment. Yes. Where's the line?
It's an interesting one, that one, because I've seen companies get incredibly arrogant because they're like, we know the client and we also know what's good for the client. We know what you need. You don't even know what you need. I know what you need.
Oh, I've heard that said so many times. The client doesn't really know what they want.
You're competing with a company that is wooing your client. And I've talked about proposals being almost like a romantic exercise. You're giving a proposal to work with you. And when you come along and say, hey, you would be so lucky to have me because I'm amazing and I have all this talent and I can do all these things for you. And you make it all about you, that doesn't resonate. Same if you're flooding them with details that you think are important, but they don't care about. So again, it's really important to continue wooing and continue treating them respectfully and creating space for them in the working relationship.
Absolutely.
And if you know that there are issues with what you have delivered somewhere along the line, then address the elephant in the room. Show that you have learnt that lesson. Show that, over time together, you've managed to get to where exactly the client wants, and then show them it would be a risk to change horses at this time. Because guess what? We know this now. We've learnt this. Anyone coming in now, they're going to have to catch up. And they're going to make all the mistakes all over again. So if you do know as an incumbent that there are certain things that your client just doesn't like about their past with you, don't shy away from it. Don't go, oh, no, we can't talk about it. Don't talk about that. We can't talk about that. It's like, no, honestly, put it on the front page. Yes. Tell them what you've learned. Be brave, be bold.
Lessons learned are so valuable. And I have worked for a company that there was an entrenched opponent because we had stuffed a job up. And they just ignored that. I said, can we please send someone, an exec, to go and talk to this client? Ignored that and still put in 10 tenders to this one department in government. Lost them all. But yeah, lessons learned, acknowledging your mistakes and what you're going to do differently is a great way to show the client that you're listening to them.
You talked about arrogance in tendering. I talk about humility in it. Here I am, and here I'm humbling myself and humbling my organisation to ask you, please, to listen to what we have to offer. It's not, hello, we are the greatest. Come and choose us.
Praying for 20,000 years, and we bring a broad range of services, and we're a one-stop shop. Like, all of that has been heard before.
Yeah. And there's a subjectivity to tendering. It's like people ask us about our win rate and everything else. It's like, well, I don't talk about win rates. I talk about putting clients in the best possible position to win. But the only way to be able to put yourself in the best possible position to win is to be able to see the subjective and to see what might influence the result of the tender that is unwritten, that is unstated. You can picture, the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg, the stated requirements of a bid sitting sort of above the water. You can see that. And then the bias and the perception and the risk orientation and the politics and the dynamic of individuals within an organisation and the financial capacity and all of that sitting underneath. That's where you win the bid.
Definitely. And you find most of that out before the tender hits.
That's it.
You can even ask, like, I've had a lot of clients say, we lost that tender on price. Our price was too high. We lost it on price. But you can actually ask the client for their budget before Probity.
Money. People hate talking about money.
Talking to someone in the first place and then asking about money are both really uncomfortable for most people.
Push through the discomfort.
Push through it. It can make such a difference.
Well, what client-centricity is really about is, at its core, those people, those clients, understanding them, listening to them, and then building something really specific to chase that win off the back of that understanding. Thanks for the chat. Maybe next one we'll have a rosé and we'll talk a bit more.
Sounds great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jet.